How are you guys doing? Today is Monday, September 6th, 2021. I'm James Sims, and for this episode of The Elite, I'm going to do an elite individual profile of John Wall. The elite starting point guard for the Houston Rockets turns 31 today, and my intent with this episode is, of course, to bring light to what he's been able to accomplish along with his accolades and achievements from the moment that the spotlight was put on him as a top prospect at Kentucky, even before then, up to where he is now after playing a full decade with the Washington Wizards, as he looks to see what the second half of his career might bring. But if you're not familiar with John Wall, he's about 6'3", 210. He's incredibly quick, incredibly agile, and at the same time, he has a ridiculously high, just like on-court IQ. He knows how to use his athleticism and his quickness to his advantage. And of course, knowing that the average basketball player is taller than him, he does have like that energy, that tenacity, or like that dog in him that makes up for his height. And even despite everything that he's been through over like the last couple seasons, I do think that for this 2021 year, he's definitely going to be a player that many are going to be looking out for with this Houston Rockets team, especially if nobody expects it. If you're unfamiliar with John Wall, he's originally from Raleigh, North Carolina. And after being one of the best basketball prospects in the state of North Carolina, he would go and commit to play at the University of Kentucky with John Calipari. John Calipari's first season as a coach at the University of Kentucky was John Wall's one-and-done season, which took place in 2009-2010. And in John Wall's only season playing collegiate basketball, he would start all 37 of the games he would play for a Kentucky team that will go on and finish 35-3. They would eventually get bounced out of the Elite Eight, and of course, congratulations to them for at least making it that far. This team would eventually get bounced by the second seed of that tournament, Virginia. But regardless, in that season itself, John Wall in college would go on to average 16.6 points, shooting 46% from the field, 32.5% from three, and 75% from the foul line, which is incredibly good in the SEC. In addition to the 16.5 points, he averaged 4.5 rebounds, 4.3. He averaged 6.5 assists, 1.8 steals, and half a block as well. Following his lone season at Kentucky, John Wall would establish himself as a good enough prospect to be taken with the first overall pick of the 2010 NBA draft by the Washington Wizards. And just for a little bit of context, looking at other players that were taken in that draft, in the top 10, looking at players that went to the All-Star game, the fifth overall pick in that draft was John Wall's college teammate, as DeMarcus Cousins went to the Sacramento Kings. The ninth pick in that draft, Gordon Hayward, would be drafted by the Utah Jazz. And then the 10th pick of that draft, Paul George, was taken by the Indiana Pacers. And all those guys are doing pretty well right now. And then looking out and then following that, John Wall will go on to play for roughly a decade for the Washington Wizards in the nation's capital. His very first season would be the 2010-2011 season when he was just 20 years old. In his age 20 season, he would start 64 of the 69 games he would play in a season where the Washington Wizards would finish with a 23-59 record. That would be the worst. That would be the third season in a row in which the Wizards didn't make the playoffs. But in John Wall's rookie season, John Wall would go on to at least make like the all-rookie first team. We didn't necessarily get any top accolades. While averaging 38 minutes a game, John Wall averaged 16.4 points a game. He averaged 4.5 rebounds, 8.3 assists, all while shooting 41% from the field, 29.6% from three, 76.6% from the foul line as well. He also averaged 1.8 steals per game and half a block. So in his first season, John Wall did show that he could be at least he made himself the starter and I guess he was able to take a lot of that weight, a lot of that pressure off of many, and as he was the number one overall pick that was deemed to save the franchise. And in that first year, I do not think he disappointed. Following that 2010-2011 season, John Wall will come back for a second season in D.C. In 2011-2012, his age 21 season, he would start all 66 of the games that he would play in a season where the Wizards would finish with a 20-46 record. This was during the lockout season, where every team played about 16 games less. They would still finish with the third worst record, or they finished with the second worst record in the Eastern Conference. In the season, John Wall would see his minutes drop down to about 36 minutes per game. He saw his points stay at about the same. He was averaging 16 points a game while shooting 42% from the field. He shot 7% from three, and he would go on to shoot 79% from the foul line. He did not shoot that many threes in his second season. In addition to averaging 16.3 per game, he saw his rebounds stay at about the same at 4.5. He saw his assists stay at about the same as they were his rookie year. They dropped a little bit from 8.3 to 8. His steals dropped from 1.8 to 1.4, but his blocks did increase from 0.5 to 0.9. Like I said, following his second season, the Wizards would not make the playoffs. And not many people were starting to recognize John Wall as that franchise guy. Many people were wondering if he was just a guy that was plateauing. John Wall would start to make more improvements his next season. In his third season in Washington in 2012-2013, his age 22 season, he would start 42 of the 49 games he would play in a season where the Washington Wizards would finish with a 29-53 record. That was 6 more wins than they had won in their last full season, but they were still sitting 12th. They were still sitting comfortably outside of the playoff picture. This season, John Wall's minutes per game average dropped from 36 to 32.7, so he would average 33 and a half minutes less per game. He would still see his points increase from 16.3 to 18.5 points per game, while shooting 44% from the field. At that point, the highest percentage he shot. He would shoot 27% from three, and he also shot 80% from the foul line. This would be the first time he shot 80% from the foul line in his career. He averaged 4 rebounds, which at that point was a career low, and he averaged 7.6 assists, which at that point was a career low as well, also averaging 1.3 steals, another career low at that point. But just showing that he was really getting it all together, and that was the last season that John Wall had before he would go on to first take his team to the playoffs and to be an all-star and an outstanding player that many would recognize as one of the best in the game. So going into John Wall's first all-star season, that would be his 4th season in the NBA, his age 23 season. And in his 4th season with the Washington Wizards, he will go on to start all 82 games. That is the only time thus far in John Wall's career he has started all 82 games in a season. He did that in a season where the Wizards would finish with a 44-38 record. They won 15 more games than they had the previous year. They would jump from 12th in the East to 5th in the East. And in that season, John Wall would see his minutes per game jump up from 32.7 to 36.3. He saw his minutes increase by 3.5 again to the regular starters' minutes he was averaging before. He averaged 19.3 points per game, which at that point was a career high, shooting 43% from the field, 35% from three. That's the first time he shot at least 30% from three at all. So 35 was incredibly well. And he was making over 1 3 a game, so he was actually shooting them. And he shot 80% from the foul line for the second year in a row. He went on to average 4.1 rebounds, 8.8 assists, which at that point was the third time in his first 4 seasons he averaged at least 8 assists per game, which is still an incredible feat. And even then, that was his career high at that point. And he averaged 1.8 steals, tied with his rookie season for the most he'd average in a season. And then he also averaged 0.5 blocks, tied with his rookie season for the least he'd average. Also, at the conclusion of like I said, at the conclusion of that season, also he would go on to win the slam dunk contest. So that was the season where John Wall was more than becoming a household name, but he was becoming the franchise player that many expected him to be when the Wizards drafted him. And then once the Wizards went to the playoffs for the first time with him there, they would end up beating the Bulls in their very first playoff series in 5 before losing to the Pacers in the conference semis. And this is 2013-14. So this was the season where the Pacers would lose to the Heat, who would lose to the San Antonio Spurs in the finals. But that's just neither here nor there. Following John Wall's first All-Star season, he would come back to DC for his 5th season with the organization in 2014-15. In his age 24 season, John Wall would start all 79 of the games he would play in a season where the Wizards would finish with a 46-36 record. They had 2 more wins in the previous year, finishing with the 5th best record in the East. John Wall would see himself averaging around the same minutes he did the previous year. He would see his points tick down from 19.3 to 17.6 as he shot 44.5% from the field, the highest percentage he shot from the field at that point, at then career high. He shot 30% from 3 and 78% from the foul line. He would go on to average 4.6 rebounds, which was tied with his rookie season for the most rebounds he'd average in a season. He also averaged 10 assists per game, like flat. The first time he ever averaged a double-double in a season. Of course, the first time he ever averaged 10 assists in an NBA season. He also averaged 1.7 steals as well. At the conclusion of the 2014-15 season, John Wall was also named to the all-defensive second team. So in addition to averaging a double-double offensively, he was recognized for the only time in his career as one of the league's best defensive players. So just to give a sense of how well-rounded John Wall has been. At the conclusion of the 2014-2015 season, where he was named an All-Star for the second time in a row, the Wizards would end up sweeping the Raptors in the very first round before getting swept by the Atlanta Hawks, who ended up being the number 1 seed that year before the Hawks got swept by LeBron's Cavs. So following that season, John Wall would come back for his 6th season with the Washington Wizards. And in his age 25 season, he would start all 77 games in a season where the Wizards would finish with a 41-41 record. John Wall would be named an All-Star for the 3rd season in a row in 2015-16. He would average 19.9 points per game. That would be the most points he'd averaged in a season up until then. He averaged roughly virtually 20 points a game while shooting 42% from the field, 35% from 3. That's the second time he's done so in his career. And he shot 79% from the foul line. He averaged 4.9 rebounds per game, which even to this season, is the most he's ever averaged in a season. He averaged 10.2 assists. That would be the 2nd season in a row he averaged at least 10 assists in a season. This would be the 5th time in his first 6 seasons in which he's averaged at least 8 assists. And this would, at this point, 10.2 was a career high in assists at that point. He also averaged 1.9 steals, which at that point was a career high as well as 0.8 blocks. So he was virtually doing everything for the team in 2015-16. At the conclusion of the year, even though the Wizards would not make the playoffs, like I said, John Wall would be named an All-Star for the 3rd year in a row. So people were recognizing how important and impactful he was for this Wizards team. Following that season, he would come back to the Washington Wizards for his 7th season with the team. And in his age 26 season, John Wall would start all 78 games he would play in a season where the Wizards would finish with a 49-33 record. They would finish with the 4th best record in the East. That 2016-17 is the last full season of basketball John Wall has played. And when I say that, I mean that is the last time he's played more than 41 games in a season. He would go on to be named an All-Star for the 4th year in a row, and he would go on to be named to the All-NBA third team, the only time he's been named to an All-NBA team in his NBA career. He did all this while averaging a career-high 23.1 points, shooting 45% from the field, 33% from three, and he shot 80% from the foul line. This is the third time in his career he shot 80% from the foul line at least. In addition to averaging 23 points, he would average 4.2 rebounds, roughly what he was doing around the time. He averaged 10.7 assists, which even to date is the most assists he's ever averaged in a season in his career. This is the third straight season he averaged at least 10, and he has not averaged double-digit assists in his career since 2017. He also averaged 2 steals. That's the only season in his career he's averaged at least 2 steals a game, and then he averaged 0.6 blocks. Following the season in which he was named to the All-NBA team for the only time in his career, the Wizards would end up beating the Hawks in the first round with a little help from Paul Pierce, and then they would end up getting spanked, or they would end up losing very closely to the Boston Celtics in the semifinals. But of course, this would go on to be the year where the Cavs would lose to the Warriors this would be the year in which Kevin Durant first signed with the team. Following the 2016-17 season, John Wall would come back to the Wizards for what would be his 8th season with the team. He would only start he would only play 41 games that season, starting all of them. In that season, the Wizards would end up with the 8th best record in the East with a 43-39 record. Looking specifically at what happened to John Wall within that season, he would end up getting sidelined with a left knee injury, which required surgery at one point. But in his most recent NBA All-Star game to date, his 5th straight All-Star season, he would average 19.4 points, while shooting 42% from the field, 37% from three, and 72.5% from the line. The 37% from three is the highest percentage he's ever shot from three, and he was making a 3.5 per game, so he was shooting them. He would do this while averaging 3.7 rebounds per game. The first time in his career he averaged under 4 rebounds a game. He averaged 9.6 assists. That'll be the 4th season in a row he averaged at least 9 assists, but the first time in the last 4 seasons in which he did not average at least 10. He averaged 1.4 steals. He averaged 1.1 blocks. That's the only time in his career he's averaged at least a block per game as well. But at the conclusion of the season, with John Wall being having just a limited presence, the Wizards would fall short to the Toronto Raptors in the 2017-2018 season. And of course, this would be the season where the Cavs would fall short to the Warriors yet again. Following that season, John Wall would come back for the 2018-19 season, and he would only start 32 games looking at how they played. And this would be a season in which the Washington Wizards would finish with a 32-50 record, completely missing the playoffs. He would end up missing most of the season with a left heel injury, and he would end up getting season-ending surgery. And then he would get an infection from the surgery and then suffer a left Achilles tendon when he slipped and fell in his home, which would rule him out for the next season. But regardless, in that 2018-19 season, in his last season with the Wizards, he would go on to average 20.7 points in the 34.5 minutes he played, while shooting 44% from the field, 30% from three, and 70% from the foul line. In addition to the 20.7 points per game he was averaging, he averaged 3.6 rebounds, 8.7 assists. So up through his first 9 seasons in the league, only one of those seasons he didn't average at least 8. He would average 1.5 steals per game, 0.9 blocks. And like I said, at the conclusion of that season, the Wizards would not go on to make the playoffs. And after he would go on to recover from his injury, the very next team he'd find himself playing for would be the Houston Rockets in the 2020-2021 season, as he was actually in the trade for Russell Westbrook. He was traded along with a 2023 lottery protected first round pick. And ever since he has played 40 games, starting all of them for the Houston Rockets. His 2020-2021 season was his age 30 season. And of course, this was a season impacted by COVID in the sense that coming off of the last season, many people were having a shortened off season, and John Wall was slowly working himself back into the form that he was before. In the 40 games he played, he averaged about 32 minutes a game. He averaged 20.6 points per game as the sole leading scorer for the Houston Rockets, shooting 40% from the field, 31.7% from three, and 75% from the foul line. In addition to the 20.6 points per game he averaged 3.2 rebounds, which is the lowest he's ever averaged in a season. He averaged 6.9 assists, which also is the lowest he's ever averaged in a season. He averaged 1.1 steals, another career low. But of course, this is a man that's coming back from a serious injury, and it's very possible that this year, he very well could have just returned back to form. That's a very nasty, gnarly injury to succumb to. And even before then, he was a 5-time consecutive All-Star who for a 3-season stretch was averaging double-digit assists, as well as at least a steal and a half, and still putting up buckets in this league. With that said, I want to thank everyone for listening to all 21 minutes of this piece. I want to thank all the websites. I want to thank the Basketball Reference websites, of course, the Wikipedia pages I use, the NBA, NCAA websites for giving me what I needed to do this. I want to thank everyone for listening to all 21 minutes of this piece. I hope all is well. And if you ever get a chance, please watch John Wall. He is currently wearing number 1 for the Houston Rockets. My intent with these episodes is to show what these players have been doing up until their birthdays. And hopefully by this time next year, if he's still on this list, I'll have more to talk about between this year and next year. And hopefully through 22 minutes of me rambling, I've probably said enough to convince at least 1 or 2 people that John Wall is still an elite basketball player that most definitely hasn't fallen off, but is rather recovering from an injury that was supposed to be 2 months but lasted more than a year. With that said, thanks for listening to my piece. I hope all is well. Happy birthday to John Wall. Once again, today is Monday, September 6th, 2021. I want to wish everyone well, and thanks for listening to my piece. I hope all is well, and once all of today's exhibitions and matchups are done, I will catch you tomorrow. Thanks for listening to my piece. I hope all is well, and peace out. I'll catch you with another episode tomorrow.